Ladies and gentlemen, we had some breaking news that actually just happened not too long ago, and it is on the PlayStation side. We've been working to put together like a PlayStation podcast at some point, but this is big enough news to where I wanted to at least just have maybe a one-off or something. Let us know in the comments if you guys want to see these kind of just videos pop up if anything really big happens in the industry, because I think it'd be a lot of fun to be able to cover these as well, especially when I can bring in a person for maybe a one-on-one talk with it. And this time, I have brought Nate the Hate with me to discuss Jim Ryan stepping down or retiring, I guess, from Sony.
Yes, the news just came out that he is retiring, ending a near 30-year tenure at Sony Interactive Entertainment. He's been there since 1994, before the birth of the PlayStation. So he has seen a lot of things. He has seen the full evolution and the full embracing of Sony leading the way in the video game industry. So in a lot of ways, this is a very iconic move for Jim Ryan, and it's kind of an industry disruptor because he started very low in the industry at Sony all those years ago, and he worked his way up, and he is a transformative figure for Sony and the PlayStation.
So this says he's retiring March 2024, which I guess from when he started, that would complete 30 years at Sony. But it looks like he's basically moving off of his primary role in October. So like 4 or 5 days from now, he's basically out of that decision-making spot. And it looks like Hiroki Totoki, who's the COO and CFO currently, will be filling in that role as like an interim spot. And then they're going to move to select, I guess, somebody as we go into 2024. I can't imagine that the interim Totoki will be there for more than maybe 6 or 7 months. That seems like a while, but I feel like they're going to mostly be there to fill in for the holiday season and then kick off 2024. But Nate, I got to say, there's a lot of celebrating going on here today after the news broke. And I'm curious who they'll put in Jim's place. And I mean, I know Jim Ryan, I would say his big weakness is his inability to communicate at all with the player base. He does not come off as the Sean Layden type, the Shuhei Yoshida, the people who are playing the games. We saw him hold a controller.
Yeah, we saw him hold a controller. He wore a Pulse headset in some videos. But yeah, his weakness was definitely being able to communicate and connect with that gamer level. And despite all those years at PlayStation, he just didn't have that form of delivery where he could resonate with the fan base. Sometimes said, some silly things that really got the audience and community angry at him. But I don't feel as though this is a moment for celebration.
You seemed a bit more concerned, even on on Twitter. You're like, I don't. There's an unknown right now in front of Sony, and maybe that's what it is. Maybe you're thinking, well, you know where you are with Jim Ryan, right? And I know the last thing he announced technically was that he's raising the PlayStation Plus price, and here's Saints Row. That's not a great thing to go out on now I think about it, man. But you kind of know where you stand with Jim Ryan technically, because he's been leading the way technically for PlayStation since just before the PS5 came out. But like, you don't really know which way Sony's going here in the next couple of months.
Right. It comes down to that old saying, sometimes you're better off with the devil you know than the devil you don't. So we know what to expect from Jim Ryan. We knew he was a poor communicator. We had a general idea of where he stood on certain matters when it came to Sony and the PlayStation. And now we're entering that unknown territory where are we going to get someone who's going to be transformative? Or are they going to follow a lot of industry trends that we have seen? And I think a lot of it just comes down to that basic point that the general fan base, the community forum users, they pin blame on Jim Ryan as though he was the sole individual to choose to raise the price of PlayStation Plus, to bring PlayStation Portal to the market and price it at $200, to price PlayStation VR2 at what it was at, and make other decisions like closing down Sony Japan Studios and things that really didn't resonate with the community base because it felt as though Sony and PlayStation were moving away from what made PlayStation such a defining company back in the PlayStation 1 and PlayStation 2 generations. And these decisions were not solely made by Jim Ryan. This was a business wide thing, but it's easier to blame the face of the company, which was Jim Ryan. So a lot of the celebratory actions you're seeing today and those reactions, it feels as though they think Jim Ryan is to blame for a lot of these decisions that were made, and they think whoever is going to come in is going to reverse course or take Sony in a brighter new direction. But we cannot say that right now. We don't know the direction Sony's going to go in under this new leadership. And yeah, it could be positive, but there's also a chance it could go in a very dire direction. And, you know, maybe in a year from now, we'll have a clear, direction as to what PlayStation will be doing under new leadership. But I think one should stop and reflect on a lot of change that Jim Ryan did bring to the company, and there was a lot of positive things that he had during his tenure.
I I mean, I'm sure there's people are already going wild with the conspiracy theories and stuff online. What exactly happened here? And we're still technically running on that with Sean Layden because that was kind of abrupt as well. And Jim Ryan came out the other side, leading the way for PlayStation. I kind of look at this as legitimately just he's retiring. Like the fact that he's also going to stay on for several months and isn't just like ousted immediately, and he's been there for 30 years, and he's like,
Hmm.
I think he's like 55, I think, and in CEO years, as we've seen with basically any big company, it ages you rapidly. So I feel like this is by the book standard, straightforward. I don't think there's anything too weird or like oh he's getting thrown out the building or something. I don't think anything that like that is happening. He
Hmm.
did mention though, Nate, that one of the reasons that he is basically stepping down is he's found it increasingly difficult to reconcile living in Europe and working in North America. And I'm immediately thinking of the travel, the time differences. Like he's probably up at all crazy hours of the night and everything. And yeah, probably he has family there, I assume, and he doesn't want to technically live and move permanently to the US then if that's the case. And I just feel like he's like, you know what? I'm good. I got money. I'm ready to ride off into the sunset and go fishing.
Yeah, it feels as though he just looked at it and said, the time is right. I've helped launch the PlayStation 5. I feel as though the company is in a good spot right now. And I'm hitting a point where I'm getting at a certain age. I can't do these hours. It is a lot of stress. And he chose that this is the right time for him to move on. And I don't think there's any nefarious thing going on in the background. I've seen some people suggest that maybe because the Activision Blizzard deal wasn't blocked, that Sony leadership is angry and they're trying to remove Jim Ryan as a result of that. I don't think anything of the sort is happening here. This feels as though it was his decision to make. And maybe the timing is a little coincidental where he agreed, I'll stay on until that deal is done, be it blocked or approved. And then once that comes to terms, I will officially announce that I am planning on retiring and moving on from the PlayStation family. But it does feel as though this was a decision that he made personally, and it's not fueled by the PlayStation Plus increase or fan reaction to it or any other external factors.
Okay, so we've established that it's pretty straightforward retirement. He was brought in to launch the PS5, get it in a good place before he moved on essentially into retirement. I'm curious now because, as we know, hardware starts very, very like years and years before it actually comes out. The person that they hire in this position, I have to assume, is going to start and lead the way for the PlayStation 6. And I think that becomes very intriguing when it comes to the hire to run PlayStation. Do you think they're hiring from within, Nate? Do you think they're going to go outside the company?
I think it will be from within. I think the bigger question that people should be wondering right now is which region are they going to select from? Are they going to
Hmm.
go Europe again, which would possibly present someone like Herman Hulst? Are they going to come to North America, or are they going to choose leadership from within Japan? And with Sony being more of a Western focused company, especially over the last couple of generations, I think the assumption many people would make is that they're going to choose either a European or North American leadership. But part of me does wonder if they're going to go with Japan, especially when you look at the interim individual being chosen here being from the Japanese HQ side of things. So I am kind of thinking that they're going to go with a Japanese,
Yoshida's coming up.
not
Here we
Yoshida.
go. Oh, okay.
But
I
I
don't,
think
I don't know if he
they
wants
might
that
go.
job either. I don't know. I kind of feel like he's, I don't know, happy, but I feel like content might be the word for him. I mean, he's been
Mhm.
there a while too. He's lived a life like of gaming and stuff. So I don't know.
Yeah, and he's doing his little thing, talking to
Mhm.
indies and such, and bringing them into the fold. But I wouldn't be too surprised if they go with Japanese leadership to take helm
Mm,
of PlayStation moving forward. And you know, it's definitely going to be curious who they select from if that ends up being the case, regardless of the region, because this is a big role. And when you look at kind of previous leadership choices, they are names that you knew of prior. Like Jim Ryan was a big name during the PlayStation 3, completely turned around the PlayStation 3 in the European region. And then you had, Andrew House and Layden and such. But these were individuals you knew about. Right now, I don't think there's really a clear person that we could say and have confidence would be stepping up to this role. And I think that's why Herman Hulst comes up a lot because he is fairly prominent in the company right now. And
hmm
he's really the biggest name that anyone could name at the time to say he would be good to step into that leadership role. Just a question of does he want it? And is that the direction or the individual Sony is looking to take PlayStation in for the coming generation?
I think the question comes down to going forward, especially into the PlayStation 6 generation. Does Sony want to be more services based or do they want to be more hardware first based?
I mean, that's the $1,000,000 question. And I mean, that's the thing. A lot of people looked up the games as a service that have been introduced under the Jim Ryan tenure as decisions he made, where it really, I think, comes down to what Sony leadership has wanted. So they're going to find someone who has a similar vision. And I wouldn't be surprised if Sony embraces that live service, type of platform
Yeah.
even more aggressively moving into the PlayStation 6 generation and even the second half of this PlayStation 5 generation with more service based games. So, I mean, it's going to be interesting to see that reaction. Will Jim Ryan still get blame even if he's out of office? Or will whoever is replacing him now be burdened with the blame of decisions that may not be purely theirs to make?
What's interesting though is that we haven't seen all the games that Jim Ryan greenlit because it takes so long to make these titles. So there's a chance that we still will be seeing Jim Ryan Productions 3, maybe 4 years from now.
Hmm.
So we don't know the full story of what Jim Ryan was technically overseeing yet. So that's something to kind of keep in mind going forward. But whoever they end up hiring, it will be very interesting to look at their background, especially if they're more finance based, so by the numbers, as opposed to maybe they're more of a creative. I think if they come in and they have a big time financial background and they're kind of like Jim Ryan where they don't really play a lot of it or not really into the hobby personally, I wouldn't be shocked if they go, you know what, the service stuff makes sense. The games as a service makes money. If it's done right, we can do it right.
Yeah, that comes back into that idea of the devil you know versus the devil you don't. If they go with a businessman, a finance man, you're going to potentially get leadership who's going to double down on service games and push subscription service, games as a service, all the stuff that a lot of gamers have spoken out about because their main motivation is going to be to drive profits. Now, if you come in with someone who maybe started as a game designer, a developer, or even a producer, they might have a different take on things, but it still would come down to how much say would they really have if Sony leadership, if that's the direction they want to take PlayStation in, yes, the new president could push back a little bit, but ultimately, if the decision is to be made, Sony leadership will do it. And I mean, right now, just as a reactionary thought, I think they're going to find a suit, another business suit similar to Jim Ryan that they are confident can continue to drive growth in the PlayStation ecosystem.
I mean, if you're the CEO, you have to think of that bonus, how big it would be if you happen to find another Fortnite.
Uh-huh.
Like, it's going to be
And
ridiculous.
yeah, and we know Sony has invested in a near a dozen live service games that
Yep.
many still are waiting to be
I
announced.
think we're waiting
And
for 7 of them to be announced still.
Yeah, that's a lot of games. And I mean, unless they all underperform, I don't see Sony divesting from this direction.
Yeah, things are in motion. It'd be very difficult for them to just U-turn as soon as a CEO takes over or something. So I think they're on the course, especially for this generation. It's going to be more or less who do they hire and what background do they have to then apply to the PlayStation 6. 2028 sounds like it's really far away, and I mean technically it's 4.5 years or whatever. But in terms of business years, it's not that far off when it comes to the R&D around a company. I mean, we just saw Microsoft leak out a decade's worth of plans. So if these companies start working on these things 5, 6, 7 years in advance. So,
yeah, whatever direction Sony plans to take PlayStation 6 in is already currently in planning and discussions, and they're still working the finer details out of where they're going to take the platform. But once they do have a new CEO and president, they'll look at that plan, they'll look at the pitches, and they'll make that final decision if this is the proper direction to take PlayStation in, and if it matches their vision. But like you said, there's a lot of time between now and then, but it's definitely going to be an interesting window of development for Sony moving forward. And that's why I definitely pause when it comes to the celebration. We don't know what the future brings for PlayStation. It could be good, but right now, I need to see what's coming next before I can celebrate what is coming to an end.
Interesting times right now for Sony going forward. You think, last thing, you think if we have that let's just say we have a PlayStation showcase or a sizable state of play in the start of 2024 before a new CEO is chosen, do you think they have Hiroki Totoki go out on camera and discuss things and introduce themselves technically again? Or do you think they have Herman Hulst come out?
I mean, that's a risky move for them to bring out someone like Herman Hulst if he's not to be the successor. Like, if he's going to be groomed as the successor, then I think I would bring him out. Otherwise, I don't think I bring anyone out until they have made a firm decision.
I feel like if Herman Hulst comes out on a PlayStation showcase in like the first quarter of 2024, I'm going to start leaning towards that. I'm be like, I think he's getting the CEO position, but well, hey, we'll see, because they got to start talking about 2024 at some point, since it's right around the corner. But interesting times ahead for gaming, for Sony, and everything there. So, guys, drop a like down below for Nate. He's got to be at work early in the morning, and I was like, yo, get on here, get on Discord, let's talk about this thing for a bit. So but thanks everyone for joining. Let us know if you enjoy kind of these one-offs, and I can occasionally nudge Nate and tell him to get on Discord for a little bit to discuss random things going on. But until next time, guys, make sure you check out the Spawncast Network, spawncastnetwork.com. It's linked down below. We'll see you guys next time.